As a teacher of United States history, I find that what Donald Trump is doing is very interesting. But as a teacher in general, I find his dismantling of the Department of Education, a little close to home.
No, I am not okay!
So before we get into the weeds, I'm going to throw some disclaimers out there. I am no constitutional lawyer. I am not a professor of constitution or law at a university, any kind of prestige university. I am just an 8th grade teacher of United States history here in California. So my knowledge, I want to say it's too in-depth. But what I do have is I have 20 years of experience as a school teacher. So hopefully my insight can help some of you out. So what exactly is this executive order that he has? Now, the first thing you understand is he doesn't have the authority to totally dismantle the Department of Education. That has to come from Congress, the lawmaking body and all that stuff. So he doesn't actually have the power to dismantle it, but he does have control over it. And he can, as he says, take it apart as much as possible legally. So you can cut jobs, you can cut programs, you cut different things. He can do with that. And he actually is and has done that currently. He's really pulling back a lot of the things going through the Department of Education. Now, he does guarantee that certain things are going to stay in place, maybe not say with the Department of Education, but they will be taken care of. So for example, he mentioned that student aid, that will be taken care of. That responsibility is just going to be shuffled over to another department or another agency. There's students with disabilities. Once again, not saying they're all going to be thrown to the wayside, but those programs and those things that protect students with disabilities, that can be oversaw by another agency or another department. So these key things that raise some red flags is promised that they will be taken care of by other departments or agencies. So that's all great, and that's fine and dandy, but it still leaves the question, what happens if there's no Department of Education? Each state is going to be a little different. Now, this is what I love teaching to my students, is that states are actually responsible for their own education. Certain responsibilities that states have, and this is one of them. And one of them is providing education for the people living in that state. And so this is why that if, and I love this because my mom is actually from Germany. She always says, it doesn't make sense to me why each state's a little different. And I try to explain to her the idea of federalism. She doesn't want to hear all that. But that's what it comes down to. Each state is a little different in what they teach. So for example, I live in California. If I went to Texas and taught in Texas, I might be teaching something different at the 8th grade level in Texas. And the curriculum itself might be different. It varies from state to state because each state's responsible for their own education of their citizens. So with that said, when the department is dismantled or really drawn back a lot, you're going to see more of these differences between each state because you're not going to have this overshadowing, body of regulation and everything else. But what has happened in the past is if the government is trying to promote a certain thing, whatever that thing may be, something that's taught or the way we handle certain students, but if they're trying to promote something nationwide, what they have, their carrot is, they provide about 15% of the funding to most of the states. So in California, about 15% of our funding for education comes from the federal government. And with that, with those funds come certain things they're supposed to do with those funds, maybe low income or poverty or meals or something of that sort, whatever that government program is. Now, if we dismantle the Department of Education, we still are maybe able to grab that funding, but I presume, and here's my little prediction, is that Donald Trump's going to tie that funding to something that he wants to see happen. So the fact that I live in California, this is how I think it's going to affect California. So 15% of our funding comes from the federal government. Now that funding will be tied up with Donald Trump, and he could decide how he's going to distribute that funding and what he's going to attach to it. Maybe he's going to, have certain things in there that you can't recognize different pronouns, or maybe there's something in there about certain things you can't teach. Whatever it is, those regulations or those funds are going to be tied with those expectations. Now, knowing what I know about my state of California, and what I know about the President Trump, they are pretty much in opposite opinions about many different things. So here's my prediction. I'm going to put my little prediction hat on, right? Maybe conspiracy hat if you want to call it that. But here's what I'm going to predict is going to happen in California. California is going to oppose a lot of what the president wants to do when it comes to education. Doing that is going to result in California receiving about 15% less in funding. That's going to force California to change their education, not necessarily what they teach, but as far as what they're able to pay for. And probably the easiest thing for them to do, or the change they're probably going to make, is they're going to maybe have less teachers, maybe fire some teachers, not hire as much teachers, which then results ultimately in a larger class size. So if the question is, how is all this change going to affect the teachers, it's going to be different from state to state. But I predict states that are more liberal, like California, you're going to see reduction in funds, and then it ultimately means going to be less teachers and higher class sizes. That's how I see this eventually all playing out. Now, you can also make an argument that one of the things that the Department of Education does is to protect, different minority groups and different special needs groups, and that could definitely be true. But we're going to save that for another discussion for someone that is an expert actually in those fields.